All right, welcome in. It's the Arrowhead Addict podcast brought to you by the Kansas City Beer Company, KC Beer Co. Check them out. Patrick Allen, Matt Verderame. Verderame, it's March Madness. The NCAA tournament has kicked off. That's all kinds of craziness. NFL free agency is going on. That's all kinds of craziness too. Unfortunately, a little bit lackluster for the Chiefs so far. Not a lot of excitement around Chiefs free agency so far. Long way to go. But before we get to all that, how you doing, man? It's been a minute.
I'm fine. I'm watching the tournament as I sit here and work and follow the NFL. The bracket is so, but you can't get irrationally mad at the bracket when you've literally spent 0 seconds all year watching college basketball. So
Yeah.
it is what it is. But no, good, man. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm all right. Dealing with some stuff here at the house. We've had this ongoing leak, like right above my head here in the
Not
office. And I got a deck. So there's like a flat roof there, and there's a deck over top of it. And I had this guy come out, and I'm new to the neighborhood. I don't have a ton of contractors or people I know yet, but I've had a lot of people look at it. This guy came out. He's came out twice. He came out with a guy yesterday. I walked around with him for 40 minutes, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we know exactly what to do. It's bulletproof." He calls me today, and he's like, "I don't think I can help you. We need carpenters and stuff. We're just not set up for that. Sorry, we didn't mean to waste your time." And I'm just like completely distraught. I've spent over $1,000 trying to fix this dang leak already. Can't figure out where it's going. I've gotten everything from, hey, just try to patch it right here to you need to put on a whole new patch of roof. It's you know this. You own a home. It's just maddening when you can't figure something out like that. If there's any of you out there are roofers or leak experts, help. Call me. I'll buy you a case of KC beer. I'll pay you. I'll buy you a year's supply of Count Chocula. I don't know what I got to do, but boy, at my wit's end with that.
That is frustrating. I do feel for you. That's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, got a hole in my roof, and I just in the ceiling up here. I want to paint this. Can't do anything. Can't do anything until I fix the leak. Anyway, other than that, we found a stray dog yesterday. Wandered in the backyard. Returned that to its owner. So that was a fun, interesting adventure. A lot more excitement going on for me than is going on for the Chiefs in free agency so far. We're going to get into all of it. We're going to get into the details. I'm sure you've been on Twitter and you've been seeing sort of a lot of Chiefs fans are moving right up onto the ledge because the Chiefs haven't signed any in their estimation big names. What would your message be to Chiefs fans out there who are in a panic right now? Should they be panicking?
You shouldn't be panicking, but you have a right to be frustrated. You have a right to be annoyed. I think pissed would be a little strong. You have a right to be annoyed. This idea that they don't have cap space is nonsense. They can restructure Mahomes' deal and save $22 million. Now, you don't want to kick the can down the road every year. That matters, but you could do it. They could have extended Hill at this point, and they haven't yet. I've been speaking to sources on that. My understanding is that things are good there. Things are fine. They're progressing, but there's no firm timetable on it. And if you're the Chiefs, like I get that, but at the same point, you say probably $15 million by extending him. And it just seems like they're really content with being content because they're not doing anything. I mean, they signed Justin Reed, which I think is a really good signing. They brought back Andrew Wiley at a good price, 1 year, $2.5 million, which I think is important. But they have huge holes on this roster. They do. I mean, there is no two ways. They are horrific at edge. Horrific. Like Frank Clark is not an answer at this point. Like it's fine what they did. It's fine they restructured him. I think that's probably the smart move, honestly. But that's not an answer. And at corner, they tried to keep Ward. They couldn't. Okay, fine. He got paid maybe more than some people thought he would. Fair enough. Snead and Fenton, I think, are good, but they don't have a number one corner on this team. I mean, they have two corners who can play, and then they have nobody. They have a problem. They have a few problems. Now, I don't care too much about the whole wide receiver thing. It's a good class. I feel like they could draft a guy in the second round to be fine there. Like I'm not, quite honestly, from a Chiefs perspective, I'm glad they didn't spend $45 million on Allen Robinson. It's fine. But they need to do something on the edge because if they don't, they're going to have a hard time getting any kind of pressure. And if you can't get pressure in this division, it is going to be a struggle. It's going to be difficult. I enjoy our Broncos fan who stops in. Look, I would calm that. You haven't gone to a playoff game since color TV was invented. I might relax a little bit there. Although, of course, the Broncos are much improved. I like what they've done. Although the Gregory deal, I'm not a huge fan of. They paid $70 million for a guy with 16 and a half career sacks. No, listen, it's going to be a really good division. It's going to be a really good division. I think the Chiefs still are the favorite in the division. I think the Chargers are the second best team in the division. I think Denver's a playoff team, probably the third best. And then the Raiders didn't guard what they are. But yeah, I get Chief fans who are antsy and anxious and annoyed after what they see.
Yeah, there's a lot of frustration out there. We're going to kind of break it down here in just a minute. First, I want to get to a couple quick notes. If you like this podcast, leave us a 5-star review over at Apple Podcasts. If you leave a question in your review, we'll answer it on the podcast. Also, check out the description if you're interested in Arrowhead Addict podcast swag. We got the link to the swag store in the description wherever you get this podcast. Welcome to all of our friends on Spaces. This is the first time that we have broadcast the podcast on Spaces. Verderame, you do that all the time on your personal. Over 60 people in the space right now. So welcome. We're also on YouTube. If you're interested in subscribing, head over to YouTube. Hit the bell if you want to get notifications when we go live. I think that was everything I needed to hit. Oh, yeah. And if you want to become a sustaining member of the Arrowhead Addict podcast, we've got a really great Discord. We hang out with everybody there. We talk Chiefs, we talk movies, we talk booze, we talk everything. It's a lot of great fun. There's some other benefits that go along with that as well. We actually have a happy hour coming up on Monday for members only. It's going to be a lot of fun. Buckle up. I'm going to knock a few back. All right. And then, of course, we're sponsored by the Kansas City Beer Company, the largest independent brewery in the city of Kansas City. You got to check them out. German-style beers, absolutely fantastic. Great friends of ours. We can't tell you enough about how much we love their beer, and that is what I will be drinking on Monday night. Okay, let's talk Chiefs. So here's where we're at. Here's where things stand so far. The Chiefs, the free agents that they've signed, with the exception of Justin Reed, have all been in-house. All right, they brought back DeAndre Baker, cornerback. They've brought back Michael Burton, fullback. Those guys are re-signed. Josh Gordon's back. And then, of course, the big signing was Justin Reed, signed from the Houston Texans. Younger guy. Look, he's not Tyrann Mathieu. In fact, he backed up Tyrann Mathieu when Tyrann Mathieu was on the Texans. But a young player, and we're going to break him down in a minute, with some upside. So we'll see where he ends up. But that sort of put the nail in the Tyrann Mathieu coffin in Kansas City, right, Verderame? Once he signed that deal, there was no chance the Honey Badger was coming back. And it's been reported the Chiefs didn't even offer him a deal.
They didn't. I know they didn't. But the way that comes off, I think, is a little different than the reality. It sounds like, oh, they just disrespected him. Where I think it's more, the reality is they were not going to offer him a contract, to my understanding, because, look, there's a little bit of, if you offer a guy a lowball contract or what he perceives to be a lowball contract, then you insult him. If you offer way too high, then you're paying more than you should. I think it was more about getting to the market and seeing how it shakes. Look, Matthew deserves to be respected. He's a great player. He'll go into their Hall of Fame one day. He'll go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame as well. And there is something to be said there for that. That you should respect them, and maybe he feels disrespected. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I will say this. He's still not signed. And there are a few good players out there who aren't signed, but like maybe they overshot the market a little bit with what he was looking for because he's still out there. I mean, all these other safeties are off the board, right? I mean, Marcus Williams, gone to Baltimore. Marcus May, gone to New Orleans. Jordan Whitehead, gone to the Jets. Justin Reed, gone to the Chiefs. Quandre Diggs, back to Seattle. Tyrann Mathieu still sitting there. You wonder if maybe they just kind of overshot the market a little bit, or maybe he says, you know what, I'm just sitting back and I'm waiting. But it is interesting. It is interesting that he's still out on the market. I do think this. There is a realistic chance that over the next 3 years, Justin Reed is a better player than Tyrann Mathieu. For the next 3 seasons. I mean, he's 25 years old. Matthew's
Right.
30. So you're paying with the idea that you're going to get the best years of these careers. I think they're fine at safety. I think they're good at safety. Their problem, again, is you have to be realistic about the fact that you do not have an edge rush. You don't. I don't want to hear one person talk to me about Frank Clark's going to come out and have a year. Frank Clark hasn't come out and had a year since he's been in Kansas City outside of one playoff run. And yeah, it was a great run, but that he has not lived up to that contract. I know he's been a Pro Bowler every one of these years. Let's be realistic. He shouldn't have been a Pro Bowler any of those years. Okay. I mean,
Right.
So they need to find an edge rush, and bringing back Melvin Ingram is fine. I'm all for that, but that's not the answer to your problems. Like Melvin Ingram's a good piece. He's not the answer to the equation. And at corner, you got to do something. You've got to do something at corner. You don't have to have a number one lockdown corner, but whether it's Patrick Peterson or it's Stephon Gilmore, you got to find somebody. And they really have not done much of anything in free agency. They've kind of just sat around and watched it go by.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The Matthew deal, look, I'm surprised he's not signed by now. There's somebody said in the chat, they asked, is the Watson trade, Apex Affairs asked, is the Watson trade holding free agency up? I think it's possible to some degree in certain areas where teams are trying to see what they're going to do, and they're going to spend a lot of money there. But you look at the end of the day, there's only so many teams that are in on a quarterback, right? So,
yeah,
it's not affecting most teams, right? Like it's not really impacting a team like the Chiefs, for example, who have their quarterback, or the Chargers. So yeah, there's some impact on a big move like that in finances for a few teams, but I don't think so. Look, I think you're right about Justin Reed. Over the course of this contract that he has signed with the Chiefs, Matthew he's probably not getting better, right? He's probably a declining player at this point because of his age. And Reed's got some upside. But I do have to say, and I want to get to the one last move that the Chiefs have made here, or not made. They have not brought back Charvarius Ward. He's now a San Francisco 49er. So he has left. And that is a big deal. And we've talked about Charvarius Ward on this podcast a lot, how great of a player we think he's been for this team. Really great guy, very solid. We noticed his absence when he was out with injury last year. So when you look at the Chiefs right now, Verderame, on paper, I think it's hard to argue, right, that this is a worse team than it was when it ended the season. Because I would say that as much as I like Justin Reed, I don't think he's Tyrann Mathieu right now. And now the Chiefs have one less starting cornerback. Would you agree with that assessment?
I think, again, they need a corner. They need a corner. They need an edge rusher. They are not the best team in the AFC right now. They're not. Like I know there's a lot of Chiefs fans who get pissed and don't want to hear that based off of my my Twitter mentions yesterday. They're not better than Buffalo. The Bills are a better team than the Chiefs are right now. Now, I don't think they're so much better than that the Chiefs couldn't beat them in a game or something. But like there's no argument to me that Buffalo is not better than Kansas City on paper. On paper. Now, you want to sit there and say, well, the Bills have to beat them in a big game. Okay. I mean, let's be real though. They probably should have beaten them last year in the playoffs. No, they didn't. They didn't beat them. That's fine. Shoulda, coulda, woulda, whatever. I thought those teams were pretty much dead even at the end of the last season. The Bills added Von Miller. They added a whole bunch of ancillary pieces. The Chiefs, I think the Chiefs are better than everybody else in the AFC, despite what our Broncos friend likes to say. And that's fine. I mean, they won a bunch of Lamar Hunt trophies back before the wheel was invented. But I think the reality is, are they better than Denver? Yeah, they're better than Denver. Or do I still think they're better than anybody in the AFC South, the AFC North? Cincinnati fans might have a beef with that, but yeah, I think so. The big question to me is, can they catch up to Buffalo? And I think they can, but they have to do something at some point.
Yeah, and that's a big point of contention for a lot of fans right now. I think even more so than the Chiefs' inaction so far in free agency is the moves that other teams in the AFC are making. So I think probably a lot of fans came into this offseason feeling like the gap had been closed a little bit in the AFC West and in the AFC in general. And now they're seeing all of these great players get added to other teams that are going to be competing with the Chiefs for the playoffs and for the AFC Championship. And the Chiefs are right now probably a little bit worse than they were at the end of the season, as Matt's lovely daughter, Maisie, has joined the show for her weekly cameo appearance. Hi, Maisie. Can you say go Chiefs?
Go Chiefs.
Go Chiefs indeed. Loving it. Loving it. For this reason alone, you should be checking us out on YouTube just so that you can see the lovely little Maisie here. Cute as a button and really classing up the joint with these two mugs. All right. So look, Charvarius Ward is gone. It's a bummer. The Chiefs need a corner. Now, look, the draft is coming. So,
Right.
I think it's easy for us all to forget about the fact that, the Chiefs have what? They have 9 picks coming up in this draft. Is that right?
I believe so. I think that's right.
Because they picked up an extra compensatory. So the Chiefs will presumably add maybe up to 9 new players to their roster in the draft. Are all those guys going to make the team? Probably not. Are all those guys going to start? Definitely not. But they're going to be adding players. And as we saw last year, if they do a good job, they can find impactful starting caliber players all throughout the draft. Now, I don't think that you want to bank on that if you're Brett Veach, but it is a huge part of team building. And as we know, with the number of stars that the Chiefs have and paying Patrick Mahomes, they need to get guys in the draft on cheap rookie contracts. Now, Verderame, I wanted to ask you, I was talking with our friend Matt Connor, one of the co-hosts of this podcast and the editor over at arrowheadaddict.com, which of course you should be reading every day to get all of your updates on the Chiefs and a lot of really cool and interesting opinions from the staff over there. Very diverse opinions. You're not always going to hear the same thing, which is what we love about that site. So Matt and I were talking, and he said, I'm really frustrated that the Chiefs haven't opened up any cap space yet. We know what the options are for them opening up cap space, right? They did open up some cap space with the Frank Clark restructure, but we also knew that they could, just extend Orlando Brown, but he's on that franchise tag, which has taken a huge bite out of the cap this year. And then, of course, there's the Mahomes restructure. And we were kind of having a little bit of back and forth about it. And he said, I don't understand why they haven't done it yet. And I was saying, well, maybe Brett Veach and of course, the Tyreek Hill extension as well that can open up cap space. And I said, well, maybe Brett Veach has all these things lined out, and he knows what he has to do to get each of them done. But he's waiting to see how certain things shake out, because if he's going to pull, like, say, the Tyreek Hill lever, right, that might be dependent on a free agent move that he wants to make. But if he's going to do maybe the Mahomes restructure, that might have to do with a trade that he wants to make because he knows the numbers and figures. Do you think it's something like that? Or are you as perplexed as Matt Connor is as to why he hasn't just restructured Mahomes? And
look, I think that's okay. So look, I think you're right in the Mahomes thing. The Hill thing, I mean, that takes 2 guys to agree. So, that is a little more complicated. But yeah, look, I think there's a lot of truth in that. They could just restructure Mahomes if they have to. But they've reached the point now where most of these impact free agents are off the board. Not every one of them, but most of them. The Chiefs are deficient in some areas. And, I saw our buddy Reach, who earlier said something about, fans, just like the team, the too dependent on Mahomes. I agree with him. I think there's always this attitude with them that it's like, and not so much with the team, just in general, because just around the team. Well, they have Mahomes, it'll just be all right. Well, yeah, until it's not. Until your defense actually has to make a play and do something. Until somebody in the offense has to do something. I think, look, the way they finished the season was maddening. Not even because they lost in the AFC title game, but because of the way they lost in that game. I mean, just a total inability to read the room. A complete inability to run the football when you are blowing a team off the football. And you don't seem to care that you're doing that because you want to play a different way. And I called it earned arrogance. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of that with them. That it's like, well, we'll just do what we want to do. Look, I think Veach has done a very good job in the years he's been in Kansas City. I do. I think he's done an A minus. I mean, he's done an excellent job. I think he's been a top 5 GM since he's been in Kansas City. They've consistently taken big swings. They've largely hit on draft picks. They've done a very, very good job. But they also have to recognize they are the hunted. They're in a division now where these teams are just loading up to the hilt because they're sick of losing to Kansas City. They've lost them 6 years in a row. I mean, all kidding aside with our buddy from Denver. I mean, Denver hasn't beaten them since 2015. Like, Denver has not won a game against Kansas City since Obama was president. Okay, that's what you're talking about. Like, they're tired of it. They're tired of it. The Chargers are tired of just getting embarrassed over and over and over. Now, is it all enough? Is what these teams did enough? I still think if the season started tomorrow, I think the Chiefs are the best team in the division. But I'll tell you right now, not by a huge margin. And The rest of that conference is no joke. The Ravens had a lot of injuries. They're better. The Bills, like the biggest issue the Chiefs have is Buffalo plays in a division where they're going to just kill these other three teams.
Right.
Miami's not good. The Jets stink. The Pats are okay. Maybe the Bills lose a game in that. It's tough. It's tough. I think that's where you look at it and go, okay. I mean, what do you do to get better? I think if you're the Chiefs internally, you respect teams like Baltimore and Denver, but you feel like you're better than those teams because you are better than those teams. I think it's more about where you stand with Buffalo. I think it's more about, to a degree, where you stand with the Chargers. Although the Chargers, I'm a big, you got to prove it to me at some point here.
Right.
That team, until they do something that matters, I got to see it. They're talented as all get out, but I've got to see them do it. The Chargers also have a lot of guys who have an injury history that is pretty lengthy, so that's also a concern. But in the end, I think Buffalo is the best team in the conference. I think Buffalo's the best team in the NFL right now. And then I think Kansas City's behind them by a half step. And then after that, I think you get a tier of the Chargers, the Ravens, the Broncos, the Bengals. I think that's those teams are all a step below Kansas City, but they're all good enough that they're dangerous.
Yeah, we've talked about this before that, I like the Broncos. I like a lot of the players that they have, but there's no telling what that defense is going to be like now that Vic Fangio has left town. And that's a big strength that they could do a flip. So, I think when I say they could do a flip, I mean, they have a lot of really good, I think, talented young receivers. And so now you bring in Russell Wilson and all of a sudden they could end up being a team that is a lot stronger on offense than defense. It's something that's, I think, important for us to remember each offseason it's a whole new team. It's a whole new ball game going into next year. So just because Denver was good on defense last year doesn't mean they're going to be this year.
Well, first, so a few things. I see Apex dropping and asking to explain how I think the Bills are better. So number one, with Denver specifically, I think Denver's better, but I do not think Denver's better than Kansas City. Denver's offensive line is still an issue. Surtain is excellent. None of the other corners are particularly great. I know they signed Gregory. That's all fine. Well, Gregory's never had more than 6.5 sacks in a season. Gregory is Frank Clark, as far as I'm concerned. He's fine. He's fine. The guy is 16.5 sacks. He's about to be 30 years old. And by the way, for the record, I can honestly say I was in the process of writing a piece when Dallas supposedly signed them about how I thought that contract was insane. So it's not just like a Denver thing. I mean, it's just a reality. I think that's one of those contracts in 2 years they're trying to figure out how to get out of it. But obviously you love the Wilson move. I thought DJ Jones was a good move. He'll run stuffing D tackle. He'll help them. But I think the defense will take a step back without Fangio. It's like if the Chiefs lost Andy Reid. Yes, I mean you're gonna lose something there. I mean it's just inevitable. Offensively, their weapons are really good. They don't have a tight end anymore without Fant. I don't want to hear about Alberto. Alberto has never done anything in his NFL career. Call me when he has 500 yards receiving. But the receivers. Listen, Sutton and Patrick and Judy are good players. I think they'll throw the ball well. The big thing with them is, can they block? Can they block? And is Wilson the guy he was 3-4 years ago, or is Wilson the guy he was the last year and a half? Because if he's that guy, he's good, but he's not great. It just depends. As far as why I think Buffalo is a little better than the Chiefs right now, because Buffalo's defense is really, really good, and the Chiefs' defense is not good right now. It's not. Now here's the one rub with this. Kansas City's offense is much more diversified than Buffalo's. Buffalo has a decent offensive line, but it's not a great offensive line. The Chiefs' offensive line is fantastic. Mahomes and Allen, I don't know that I'd call it a wash, but Allen is as close to Mahomes as anybody in football, and it could be a wash on any given day. The one concern you have if you're Buffalo, and I think this is a fair thing to say, is if Diggs gets hurt at any point or any amount of time, or just is doubled or ineffective, who's the other guy? Sanders is a free agent. Beasley got cut. Is it Gabriel Davis? I like Gabriel Davis, but can he step into that role? Maybe he can. I don't know. Maybe not. I like Dawson Knox. It's fine, but he's not been an elite tight end. He's been a solid tight end. I think the Chiefs are offensively a better team, and I think that certainly matters. But Buffalo right now, Buffalo is so much better defensively. than the Chiefs are. It's not even a contest. And Lolip, that's not. Hey man, that's not right. Listen, that's not fair. They've lost 13 times in a row to the Chiefs, not 11. So
yeah, get your figures right, man.
I mean, listen. If it's been 13, it's been 13. So we'll see. Maybe Denver at some point this millennium wins a game against them. But until they do, no, I don't think they're. But by the way, that's the other part of this. Like Denver's a brand new head coach. I have no idea how the hell he's going to be. He might be great. Hackett might be great. Hackett might also be a guy that gets fired in 3 years. You don't know. Like you can pretend to know all you want, good, bad, or otherwise. You don't know. And look, his track record says he was really good with Rodgers. He was not great in Buffalo and Jacksonville. Well, now we'll see. Vic Fangio is your weakest link offensively. He wasn't defensively. He's the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. So, look, it's going to be interesting. I think right now, I think if you're the Chiefs, your main concern is Buffalo. The rest of these teams, you respect them. They could beat you. But I think Buffalo is a team you look at and go, look, if we don't get better defensively, it's a problem. I mean, come on. Buffalo's clearly a better defensive team than Kansas City is right now. It's not arguable.
Nate S. in the chat says Hackett could be Josh McDaniels 2.0. LOL. Yeah, I mean, you just don't know. Look, and like I was saying earlier, every year things change. We're going into last season. Who was the trendy Super Bowl pick? It was the Cleveland Browns. They added a bunch of guys in free agency, shored up their defense. They had won a playoff game the year before. Everybody was like, this is it, man. They're going to make the jump. Odell's back and healthy. So, you just don't know how things are going to turn out. They didn't even make the playoffs. So things can change quickly. Injuries happen, bad coaching decisions, players, get disgruntled, they get arrested, like all kinds of crazy stuff happens. So you're looking at things on paper. This player was good last year. He's definitely going to be good this year, right? Not necessarily. So it's going to be a really interesting, couple of weeks here as we get into that second and third wave of free agency, and then of course head into the draft. But there are still some people out there, and one player that Chiefs fans were really interested in, who signed or was going to sign, but then didn't, with the Baltimore Ravens, was za'darius Smith. This is really interesting. It was reported that it was a done deal, but it sounded like almost immediately from his side they weren't so sure about that, and nothing got signed, and now he's back out there. Do you think this is a possibility for Kansas City?
I mean, they've been linked to him. I can't say that I've been told that they had interest. Doesn't mean they didn't or they don't. I just have not. I've not heard that. By the way, if you go to overthecap.com right now, which is an approximation, the Chiefs are listed as $10 million over the cap, which they can't technically be, okay, because they have to be cap compliant. But they have the worst cap situation in the NFL, according to Over the Cap. Now, look, I see a lot of people dropping this, so I'm just going to address it real quick. Danielle Hunter, who was an edge rusher for the Vikings. Okay. There's a lot of talk that he's going to get traded and or cut because his cap number is 25.8, which is just insane. According to Over the Cap, should the Vikings trade him, they save $14.4 million. They eat 11.5. Okay. Now, Danielle Hunter is one of, at least has been recently, one of the best pass rushers in football. I mean, he's still in his 20s. Still a very good player. I'm going to pull up his stats right now, so I'm not speaking in generalities. So Hunter is a two-time Pro Bowler, okay, made it 2018, 2019. Last year, he only played in 7 games. His sack numbers in his career, 6, 12.5, 7, 14.5, 14.5, and 6 in 7 games last season. So, I mean, he's a phenomenal. He's played 85 games in his career, started 56. He has 60.5 sacks. I mean, he's a phenomenal player. Now, do the Chiefs go out and get him? I have no idea. Would it be something that Veach typically does? Yeah, I mean, he's not afraid to make trades, so it's possible. But I think, look, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. They need an edge rusher. Now, the draft is loaded with them, which is good news. But they're going to need somebody who can come in and get the job done. I mean, there's no question. And you do worry about, by the way, with, I've seen people mention Danielle Hunter's disc and his back. Yeah. I mean, they have to be careful because they take on a huge contract and that goes bust. They've got a problem. So, yeah, the Chiefs might just be looking at drafting well and hoping that it works out.
No, when we talk about Brett Veach, we've talked about on this podcast a million times how he likes to go big game hunting. He's
Yep.
shown in the past a propensity to trade high draft picks to get proven veterans. Sometimes it has worked out, sometimes it hasn't. You can argue. I argue that the Frank Clark trade worked out. They won a Super Bowl. He was a part of that. He played a big part of that playoff run and in that game. So for me, I do the Frank Clark trade 10 times out of 10, even though, maybe you overpaid him a little bit. You won the Super Bowl. So Brian, our buddy Brian Windhorst over at ESPN said this after the Cavs won their championship. Winning a championship means you never have to say you're sorry, and at least not for a couple of years. So I like that one. But when we talk about Brett Veach, I've seen some people start say on Twitter that they're getting frustrated that they don't want to see any more trading high draft picks for these veterans, and the reason for that is because you pay twice, right? You've got to pay if you're bringing in a veteran. They're going to be on a big contract, like Orlando Brown, for example, right? Whereas if you draft an Orlando Brown type player, he's on his rookie contract for a number of years. What's your thoughts on that, Verderame?
Go get good players. I don't look. People get way too worked up about draft picks. Like that whole thing has become a cottage industry where people kneel at the altar of a 6th round pick. And I understand that Trey Smith was a 6th rounder last year and it worked out. Like most of your day 3 picks, most of them are guys who don't work out. To me, even your day 1 pick, you're, 50% hit rate. And if you're the Chiefs, you're picking 30th.
Right.
To me, I don't care. Would you rather had Tevin Jenkins last year? Everybody and their mother wanted the Chiefs to draft, or Orlando Brown. How'd Tevin Jenkins work out? How's that going? Tevin Jenkins got hurt, then he came back and was terrible. Okay, Orlando Brown went to the Pro Bowl and is probably worth $100 million in a contract right now. You want him? Your future. Where's Cornell Powell? Literally, where is Cornell Powell? I mean, people get so worked up. Oh God, they traded a 4th. Okay, they got good players. I mean, the Rams just won a Super Bowl. My God, with how many picks? Now, I'm not saying go full Rams. I wouldn't do that either. But if the Chiefs can go get a guy, I would. Now, I think, the guy like Hunter, he's an interesting guy. He missed all of 2020 with a herniated disc in his back. Okay. But he came back and was awesome. He had 6 sacks in 7 games and it tore his pec. I'm not worried about a guy tearing his pec. That's not like, you don't read too often a guy tearing his pec for the 3rd time in his career, right? That's kind of a freak injury. So if I'm the Chiefs, I'm thinking I'm not going for maybe a 1st round pick there. If they could get Danielle Hunter for a mid-round pick, I would absolutely do it. I would do it. I mean, I think if you're the Chiefs, look, it might not work out. That's also the kind of guy who could come in there and have 15 sacks. And all of a sudden it really works out. And now you've answered the Von Miller thing. I think that's the kind of move if you're going to make it. And if it costs the Chiefs a mid-round pick, so what? I mean, you can draft somebody who's better than Danielle Hunter. Oh, well, the guy's going to be cheap. Okay. He's going to be cheap. Who cares? I mean, if the guy's not good, who cares if it's cheap? Right? People get so worked up about all this stuff. If we trade our 3rd round, okay, well, and I'm not denigrating this guy. I'm just using him as an example. Yeah, they drafted, I think it was Colin Saunders. Was he a 2nd round pick or a 3rd round pick? It was a day 2 pick. I can't remember for the life of me. But my point is yeah, he's been cheap, but he's also not really been productive. Would you rather have a guy, Danielle Hunter, and pay him? Of course you'd rather have Danielle Hunter and pay him. Come on now. So I think sometimes we get way too worked up about draft picks. If the Chiefs can go out and get a damn good player, then you get a damn good player. And you don't worry about draft pick, especially when the cap is going to explode next year. And I see our Raiders buddy, who I appreciate you stopping in, says Hunter's got to produce. He hasn't in recent time. Well, he did produce last year. Now he got hurt. It's fair. He tore a pec, but he had 6 sacks in 7 games. I mean, he was a force of nature before he got hurt. So factor all that in.
Some breaking news here. It looks like people are retweeting. I don't know this account, Sports Talk ATL Jake, but it was.
I would hold off on that.
Yeah.
Look, it's something that big. Let me put the Eli Apple back to the Bengals, 1 year, $4 million.
Yeah, Eli Apple's back to the Bengals. Just so you know, I'm going to call it a rumor right now, though it has been retweeted by some people we know and respect, that Deshaun Watson is expected to waive his no trade clause to join the Atlanta Falcons per source. This is some kind of Atlanta maybe radio station producer. Sometimes those guys are tapped in. Sometimes they do get the jump every once in a while on the guys like Schefter.
With due respect to whoever that person is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go out on a limb right now and say, knowing how this business works, Deshaun Watson, that news is when it happens, that is going right from an agent to Schefter and Rappaport. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
There's nobody who's the only time I can ever remember someone breaking news like that was out of nowhere on a big time guy that was right was our friend of KCB or Katie Camlin.
Katie Camlin,
that Mahomes had signed an extension. That is one of the all-time scoops ever, to the point they actually did a segment on ESPN about it. Okay,
with Schefter, yeah.
Normally, I'm not saying this guy maybe doesn't have a 1 in a million shot where he's right, whatever, but like something like that, that's going to go right from the mouth of an agent in a group text to Schefter and to Rapport. That's where that's going, and it's you're not scooping them from a radio station very often on something like that. I would be shocked.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that all turns out. It's going to be interesting. But yeah, Katie Camlin, when she broke that Mahomes, the Chiefs, Brett Veach actually sent her a bottle of the Dom Perrion that they bought. I forget what the vintage was, but it's Dom Perrion, and it was, I believe, signed by Mahomes and Chris Jones. So I'm gonna next time I'm in Kansas City, I'm gonna have to ask her to show that to me. Here's a question for you. So let's say that was you, and Brett Veach sends you a rare vintage Dom Perrion signed by Mahomes and Chris Jones. Do you drink it ever?
Because of the value of it, probably not. But Dom Perrion's really good. So maybe.
I mean, that's
the only time in my life that I could ever think of that I had Dom Perrion, at least knowingly, unless I had it at some wedding I wasn't aware of, was my engagement. That's it. But it was good. It was good. It's clearly there's a reason it's so expensive, but it was excellent.
Yeah, I think I'd have to sit on it and keep it. That's something I would probably keep for a long time, because if you ever did want to sell it, if you were into that, some fans would say, hey, I'm never selling this. I'm passing it down to my kids. Patrick Mahomes, like, right. Chris Jones, this famous moment in time. But you got to also think there's a collector out there who's really going to want to get their hands on that somewhere down the line here, even right now. So Katie might be able to put her kids through college with that bottle. Yeah, man, I would have an internal struggle though, because I do like me a drink every now and again. All right, so we touched on Za'Darius Smith, and look, I think with the Veach thing that we were talking about as well, I'm with you, man. These draft picks are capital to get good players to win you Super Bowls, and so if you're able to make that trade, like let's be real here, that Orlando Brown Jr. trade last year worked out. And it is not the reason why the Chiefs didn't go to the Super Bowl. And if they had done a few other things that they should have done in that game against Cincinnati, and they went to the Super Bowl, it's reasonable to assume that they could have beaten the Rams. So if they had won the Super Bowl, will we be sitting here being like, but now we got to pay Orlando Brown Jr.? No. Everybody be like, that was great. What a job by Brett Veach. The Chiefs were able to protect Mahomes in that Super Bowl, and now they've won 2 out of 3. So, you figure it out later. The cap goes up. There are moves you can make. They have people in-house who plan ahead. But if you have if you need an edge rusher, or you need a cornerback, and you can trade a pick, that's what those picks are for. They're to acquire players.
Look, you know what? Again, this is like a pet peeve. Everybody gets so worked up about all this crap. And freaks out about, oh God, what are we going to do? We traded a 4th. Okay. You know how ridiculous that is? If you go back and you look at a draft class from 5 years ago, and I rattle off every guy who got picked in the 4th round, 28 of those guys are people you're like, who? I didn't even know that guy was in football. Who is that? What? And then there's like 2 of them who are good. Okay. So here, just as a fun exercise, I'm actually going to I'll pull up, I don't know, randomly I'll pull up the 2018 draft, because now at this point we should know who's who. So you get these people who freak out about some kind of a mid-round pick. Here's a real quick rundown. 4th round picks. Okay, I'm not even going to give the position because they're any good. You'll know who they are. Tell me you wouldn't trade one of these picks for a guy who can come in and play like the Browns just did for Amari Cooper. Here's the list of the guys: Ian Thomas, Jalen Holmes, Kiki Kuti, Naheem Hines, Antonio Callaway, Josie Jewell, Chris Herndon, Kyle Lauletta, Troy Aikpeck, Nick Nelson, Brian Allen, Mark Walton, Deshaun Hamilton, Deshaun Hand, Joel, something I can't pronounce, Dorrance Armstrong, Jordan Whitehead, good player, Anthony Averett, Kazir White, Will Dissly, Taron Johnson, Kenny Young, Durham Smythe, Armani Watts, Avonte Maddox, Ito Smith, Rick Leonard, Contavious Street, Will Richardson, Josh Sweat, Kalen Balazs, Jaleel Scott, Jamon Moore, Chase Edmonds, John Franklin Myers, Marquise Haynes, and Dalton Schultz. I just rolled off 40 names. 4 of those guys are decent. One of them has made a Pro Bowl. Sweat. That's it. One of them. And that's a pretty good, as future points, that's a pretty good 4th round, right?
Yeah.
Like Dalton Schultz, a good player. Jewell has got a 2nd contract in Denver, right? I mean, not a great player, but he's decent. But like, you're telling me if a team calls you up and says, hey, listen, we're willing to move off a guy who's a 2-time Pro Bowler, who's 29 years old, whatever the case may be, 4th rounder, you're not trading that because, hey, listen, that guy might become Armani Watts. And, he's cheap for 4 years. No, he's cheap forever because he's not as good as any of the guys you're going to trade him for. So
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of like, you go get the guys who help you win. And the rest of it, you don't worry about. I mean, look, the Chiefs didn't have a 1st round pick last year. They might have had the best draft in football. They still drafted great. So I'm not saying you do it every single year, but if you have an opportunity to go trade some mid-round pick for a big-time impact player, yeah, I'm on board every time.
By the way, just seeing it's official. The Chiefs have brought back Andrew Wiley. Good move by the Chiefs. That's a really good, solid player that the Chiefs need there along their line. And it does look like I'm starting to see on Twitter here, some people are starting to shoot down this report that that Deshaun Watson has signed with the Falcons, that no decision has been made yet. So there you go. Verderame called it. Keep your eye on Adam Schefter. All right, let's talk about the receiver position. I think a lot of people were really excited about the idea of getting Allen Robinson. He is gone. He's gone to the LA Rams, who continue their all-in approach. That probably means that Odell Beckham Jr., who of course suffered, was it an ACL in the Super Bowl?
Yes.
Yeah. So, his season is in jeopardy next year. He's a little bit older. Those people come back from those and they're fine, but he could miss part of the season. It just all depends. Everybody's body's different, how his rehab goes. So he's probably not coming back. Now they've filled his spot with Allen Robinson. So they're going to be set up there with.
Supposedly, according to Schefter, they want to sign him too.
Odell as well?
Yep.
Wow. How about that? This is, see, that they're subscribing to my go all in on receivers philosophy, because they'll end up with Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Allen Robinson, and Odell Beckham Jr. That's a hell of a receiving core. I'd run out there with that any day. So, but he's gone. So the Chiefs aren't getting him. They've been linked to Juju Smith-Schuster. They've also been reported to have interest in Jarvis Landry. Do you think either of these guys will end up being Kansas City Chiefs? Do you think both of them will be Kansas City Chiefs? And if so, when's it going to happen?
It better not be both of them. That would be insane. They have so many other needs to fill. If they sign 2 receivers, it will not be a fun column for Chiefs fans to read for me. Like, I don't think they should sign either one of them. To be totally honest with you, sign defensive players. Like everybody acts like the Chiefs have some big offensive problem. The Chiefs are scoring 40 points a game down the stretch. I don't get, like, they're fine. They're fine offensively. They have 2 Hall of Fame weapons in Mahomes and a great line, and Hardman, who's good for 700 yards, and some running backs who can play.
So you think they've got enough depth if a Tyreek Hill were to get injured, or Travis Kelce?
I mean, look, if one of those guys gets hurt, just like I mentioned with Buffalo, if Diggs gets hurt, they're screwed too, right? I mean, if your main guys get hurt, you're screwed. I'd like to see the Chiefs take like a day 2 receiver. That's what I'd like to see him do. Like, take a top 100 pick and use it on a receiver. But and by the way, like, if they can get one of those guys on a really good deal, that's fine. But not if it precludes them from getting a corner or an edge rusher. No way. I mean, they need an edge rusher. The damn team was 29th in the league in sacks last year, and they scored 35 points a game. They can't get home. They can't do anything. And their cornerbacks, I mean, I think Snead's very good. I think Fenton's solid. But, like, let's be real. Who's the third corner on this team? DeAndre Baker?
Right.
Not good. Okay? Like, you need to fix your defense. I'm not worried about them offensively. Between who's coaching them and who's quarterbacking them, with all the talent around them, they will score points. They will score points. They need to stop teams. They need to stop teams from scoring points. And Kevin, I hear you. They didn't score when it mattered. That's not totally fair. They scored 42 points in each of the first two playoff games. Now, you want to talk about the second half of the Cincinnati game? Kevin, you and I both know the reason they didn't score points in the second half of that game was because the Bengals dropped 8 guys and their head coach was too stubborn to just run the ball. If they run the ball, they walk down the field. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. And it is what it is. But they didn't score in the second half against Cincinnati because of how they played that game, not because they didn't have enough talent. The first half of the game, they're like 400 yards. So I don't believe that for 2 seconds. Their problem is defensively, they cannot get a pass rush, and at corner, they're short at corner right now. They're short at corner. But their biggest issue is their pass rush, which is why if Danielle Hunter, if they can get him for a day 2 pick, plus, by the way, don't forget, the Chiefs have 3 day 2 picks. They have 2 third-rounders. I would trade them a day 2 pick in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat for Danielle Hunter. And I'd figure the rest of it out. Because if you get that guy and you're healthy, and by the way, Fletcher Cox, who a couple people have mentioned, he's a free agent right now. I can tell you for a fact, I know from both, it's been written about, but also I had a conversation once with somebody who was in the building about this when it happened. Brett Veach was about as adamant as a human being could be when he was with the Eagles when they drafted Fletcher Cox. He was, to my understanding, doing everything possible to get them to draft Fletcher Cox. So if he leaves Philadelphia, which they're reportedly trying to get him to come back, but if he leaves, that'd be really interesting. He's also a Mississippi State guy. Who else went to Mississippi State? Chris Jones, who's already been recruiting him on Twitter. Like, if I'm the Chief, look, you want my answer to this? Move Mahomes' money down the road, sign Fletcher Cox, okay, trade for Danielle Hunter, and then in the draft, take a corner. That's what I would do. And then you've got a line of Cox and Jones inside, and you've got Hunter and Clark on the outside, and you've got a first-round pick or whatever the case may be at corner, all right? And if that defense, if you can't get pressure with that group, then just give it up. You're never going to do it. I mean, so to me, like, whatever, take a receiver with one of the picks in day 2. But that's how I would do it. That doesn't mean that's how they'll do it. Probably isn't how they'll do it. But if I were the Chiefs, that's what I do. And I think, by the way, if you had all that and you did it, you'd feel pretty damn good about your chances against Buffalo, who I think right now is the best team. But if the Chiefs did all that, I think the Chiefs would be better than them again. It's not much of a gap right now, but I think there is a small little gap.
Yeah, and another thing we bring up on this podcast a lot is don't sleep on the fact that there are players on the Chiefs right now who you don't know a whole lot about, who are going to improve, and some of them are going to contribute, right? How many of you knew a whole lot about Charvarius Ward before he ended up on the Chiefs?
Sure.
I didn't hear a lot of people clamoring, let's get this Charvarius Ward guy in there, and then he develops into a really solid player for the team. On the offensive side of the ball, to your point, Verderame, there are some guys. Jody Fortson. Remember, he's going to be back.
Yep.
We don't really know what he is. He could be nothing. He could be a nice red zone threat, right? It looked like that was what he was setting up to being. What about Noah Gray? People raved about Noah Gray last offseason and training camp.
They loved him.
Absolutely loved him. Obviously, you still got Travis Kelce there. But what happens if Noah Gray comes in and they've got an extra package where they're using Noah Gray as a receiver? You've got somebody else getting receiving yards. McCole Hardman, they found the way to get the ball into his hands. Darius Fountain was somebody who a lot of people were really, really interested in and flashed in the preseason. Now he gets another year with the team. He comes back. So sometimes the answers are within. There's no telling how much these guys are going to blossom or contribute. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs are set up in such a way on offense where you're not asking a guy like Jody Fortson to come in and be we're not talking about him being your number one option. We're not talking about him being your number two option. We're not even probably talking about him being your number three option. So if he can come in and chip in, 300 yards or something and catches 5 touchdown passes in the red zone,
right,
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So
again, I understand people don't want a receiver. I know you do, and that's fine. I get that. I totally respect it. Like there's an argument for it. I just feel like when your defense looks like their defense looks right now, to be sitting there and being like, we need another receiver. No, it's like owning a house and you're talking to your wife and you're sitting there going, you know what we really need? We really need to add on to the kitchen. We need a kitchen that's 1,500 square feet. And then your wife's like, yeah, but we don't have any bedrooms in the house. Like, yeah, I don't care. I want more kitchen space. We'll sleep on the floor in the kitchen. At some point, you got to build a fucking bedroom. I mean, they need to build a bedroom on this team. Look, what is Mahomes going to have to do against the Chargers and against the Bills, and maybe even to be fair against Denver with their offensive weaponry? They have to score 40 every game because they just can't cover and they can't get a rush and they can't do anything. I mean, I got a news for you. Nick Bolton and Willie Gay ain't fixing that. So you've got to be able to cover someone and to get pressure. And if you want to blitz the way Spagnuolo likes to blitz, you better have some corners. They don't. So I think, again, I would take a chance on drafting. By the way, I'd draft an edge rusher even if they drafted, or even if they signed one or traded for one. I'd still draft an edge rusher in the first 100 picks. But I would draft edge. I'd draft the wide receiver. I'd draft the corner. Like those, to me, if those aren't 3 of the first top picks, they're insane. Like that has to be, and you get these people who are like, I don't care, take the best player available. What if the best player available is a damn running back? Can take him?
Right.
Like that is the biggest lie in football. We just took the best guy. But no, you didn't. No, you didn't. I have had so many GMs over the years say to me, well, we took the best player available that was on our board. Yeah, because you took off 4 positions because you knew you weren't going to draft them. Okay, so look, to me, you need to fix that defense. And if you fix that defense and then you want Jarvis Landry, or then you want a guy like a Juju Smith-Schuster at a price that you can afford, fine. I'm all for it. Bring him in. But that defense has to get fixed first. By the way, and I'm actually going to do a little research on this. I might sound stupid after I send a few texts about this. Are we 110% sure, depending on the market, that they wouldn't also bring back Tyrann Mathieu?
No, I don't think we could be. I mean, after that signing, you're like, what are you paying him?
I don't think you would. The reason I ask that is Reed and Mathieu are very similar in their versatility. You can play him a little in the slot. You can play him free safety. You can play him strong safety. And the Chiefs love their 3 safety stuff. They do it all the time.
Right. And Dirty Dan's not coming back.
No, he better not be. So, are we sure? Like, if he sits out there for another 2-3 days, are we sure at some point the Chiefs would go, Tyrann, listen, what if we use you and Justin Reed, who have played together, in a situation where the 3 of you, along with Thornhill, you just, listen, we have a guy who plays robber, and we have a guy who plays deep middle, and we have a guy who plays strong, and we can rotate all of them. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'd be surprised if it happens. I will have to fire out some texts and see if that's even remotely possible. But I wonder if you're the Chiefs, if you would do that. Like, if you just revisit it and go, you know what? Instead of getting a corner who we don't really believe in anyway, like, let's bring him back and see what happens. Again, odds of it, probably low. But you could make that fit. And I got to tell you, you'd have a very interesting secondary because you could rotate guys all over. You could disguise the hell out of coverages. And you could do all kinds of crap with those 3 back there because you don't know who's coming up, who's dropping. Are they playing man? Are they playing zone? You don't know because they can both play man. I mean, I think there are bigger needs, as Stacey points out, and I agree with him. There are bigger needs, right? I spent this whole podcast on about how they need a defensive end, and I agree with that. But I just think it would just be interesting. It's just an interesting thought, depending on how this market continues to shake. Would they maybe take a look at that?
Yeah, it's interesting. And look, we're kind of hitting that second wave at this point. So, there's still a few, I'd say, first wave people out there, but like when you listen to the receivers that are left, you got Julio Jones, Will Fuller, Juju Smith-Schuster, Beckham, Valdez Scantling, Keelan Cole, Sammy Watkins, Zach Pascal, Byron Pringle's still out there, Demarcus Robinson's still out there. Those guys could end up back in Kansas City as well. Byron Pringle might look around at the offers he's getting, and if he's not getting offers that are any more than what the Chiefs want to bring him back at, he could be a late signing where he just comes back to Kansas City and slots in there at a number 4 receiver. So just because guys are gone right now, testing the market, it's good on them. They should definitely check that out. It's the smart thing to do. Find out what you're worth. Find out what the market will pay for you. But sometimes it can be a little bit of a risk. And I think maybe we're seeing that happen with Tyrann Mathieu right now. It's the Arrowhead Addict podcast brought to you by the Kansas City Beer Company. Again, make sure you hit them up on Twitter if you like what you've heard on this podcast and you want to support us. Tweet at them at KC Beer Co. and say, hey, I heard about your beer on the Arrowhead Addict podcast. Keep sponsoring these guys. You can keep the lights on for us. I need help getting my roof fixed. We need a sponsor. It's getting cold in here. I got to stuff insulation up there. It's bad news. All right, Verderame. So what do you expect from Brett Veach? I think the one thing that a lot of people are just curious about here is, did he have a plan? I mean, obviously he had a plan. That's, it's absurd to suggest that he did, right? But is this part of the plan, this sit back, slow start? Have the Chiefs whiffed on some people? Obviously, things don't always go to plan. We know they were in on Trent Williams last year. It didn't work out, so they made the trade for Orlando Brown Jr. They would not have done both of those things. So He's a smart guy. He's got contingencies. And that's why I've been urging patience to people on Twitter. I'm saying, hey, listen, like this he's no dummy. He's a very good GM. Like he's got a plan. Now, that doesn't mean everything he wants to do is going to work out. But what do you think? Do you think this is part of the plan, or has he maybe not had some things go his way?
I mean, I'll be succinct since we're hitting the hour mark. My wife's going to kill me if I don't get out of here soon for the skating lesson for my daughter. But I think it's a combination. I don't know for a fact they whiffed on some guys. I do know for a fact they want to keep za'darius Ward. That I know, and that the money got away from him. And listen, good on Ward for getting paid, but I know that with Mathieu, I think they were very ready for him to hit the market, and if the market came back to them, they were open to bringing him back. I think the Reed deal just became one that they felt like we have to pounce on that, and they did. I don't know that they've really like whiffed. Like I haven't been told that, other than again on Ward, which I don't know if you'd call it a whiff as much as maybe they just weren't willing to go to that price. And I like za'darius Ward a lot. I don't blame them for not going to the price you got paid for. But no, you know what? I think they were not planning on going and making like a bunch of huge moves. And I'll be honest, I don't necessarily agree with it. I thought the Chiefs should have been a little more aggressive. I don't think you go crazy. I don't think you do what Jacksonville did and give $20 million a year to Christian Kirk. Okay, but I thought there was an opportunity for the Chiefs to maybe be a little more aggressive than they were. And look, doesn't mean, by the way, that they won't be. You got to keep in mind one thing, and I mean this genuinely. Last year, people had the pitchforks out like nobody's business for Veach this time last year. People were going nuts. Then they traded for Orlando Brown. They had a big draft, and their offseason was awesome. So keep in mind, like free agency technically opened yesterday. There's a lot that can and will happen between now and training camp. I think sometimes it's hard to feel like you see these teams making moves. A lot of the moves, like I had a guy say to me a long time ago, and it's true. Free agents are free agents for a reason. They're either too expensive, or they're too old, or they're not good enough. A lot of these guys are getting big money deals. They're going to be cut in 2 years. That's what's going to happen. Go look at any free agency in the last 10 years. It's going to happen. So, look, if you're the Chiefs, and you're a fan of the team, is it a little frustrating? Yeah, it is, and I get that. And I think they should have been a little more aggressive. But I also understand that they're probably looking at it internally and going, we're pretty damn good. I mean, we're a pretty damn good football team, and we can fix a few of these things in the draft, and we're confident in that. And look, I mean, it's hard to argue it, right? Like, I'm sitting here saying I think Buffalo is the best team in the league. I think it's by a half step over Kansas City. I don't think it's by a ton. Okay. And by the way, in football, I mean, injuries happen. You could have one injury, that changes the whole equation. Or the Chiefs could just beat them on a given day. But I think the Chiefs are in for a real fight in that conference. But guess what? So's everybody else. Like, what do you think? Buffalo's sitting there and go, we got Von Miller, that's it. I mean, I think Von Miller's terrific, but he's also 33 years old. I mean, it's not like Von Miller's 26 and coming in there, he's got 15 sacks. Probably not. I mean, Denver did all this. Russell Wilson's great. Russell Wilson hasn't gone to a Super Bowl in almost a decade. And he's on some damn good teams in Seattle. Okay? Doesn't mean I don't think a lot of Russell Wilson. He's going to be really good. But, like, if you're the Chiefs, would you still have your group and feel pretty good about it? Yeah. I think the world of Justin Herbert. The guy's never been to a playoff game. I mean, come on. So I will say that, right? I mean, Burrow, everybody's gone nuts. Burrow's great. Burrow didn't score 30 points in any of the playoff games he was in. All right. I like the Bengals, but was that a little bit of lightning in a bottle? Probably. The Ravens, as good as they've been for years, they've won playoff win with Lamar Jackson. So it's not like the Chiefs all of a sudden is like just overwhelmed by all these teams. These teams have closed the gap. It doesn't mean Kansas City couldn't go 13-4 next year. And I think the Chiefs need to make moves to catch Buffalo, or I think there's a really good chance they're playing Buffalo in the AFC title game in Buffalo next year. But you know what, guys? You brought up the Browns earlier. It's a good point. Like, shit happens. It does.
Yeah, and before we get out of here, we got 2 quick reviews to get to, as promised. The first one comes from Renil on March 10th. Great show. Very entertaining and informative. Love the breakdown on the impact of the potential Chiefs moves. Keep up the great work, and I look forward to further free agency and draft coverage. Appreciate you, kind sir or ma'am. Then the last one comes from Trustin15 on March 11th. Highly recommended. Live in Connecticut, and having access to up-to-date Chiefs news is helpful in Jets and Giants country. Love the information, easy to digest, and all 4 hosts all come with different perspectives on all major things Chiefs related. It's a great listen. We appreciate you. Again, this is a podcast first and foremost. If you want to head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review over there with a written review like that, we will read it on the podcast. Ask a question and we'll answer it. And again, if you want to support us, you can become a sustaining member of the Arrowhead Addict podcast. Just check out the join button. All the information is in the description, wherever you find this podcast. We get to hang out with our members in a private Discord, and on there we'll be having a private happy hour on Monday. Can be drinking some KC beer with everybody, with all 4 of us hosts. It's going to be a lot of fun. Who knows what kind of nonsense we'll get up to. For Matt Verderame, my name is Patrick Ahn. We will be back if any major Chiefs news or signings or trades happen almost instantaneously. So hit that bell on YouTube if you want to know when we go live immediately. And of course, subscribe. We'll be back on Tuesday, though, for certain, with Sterling Holmes. And Matt Connor is actually going on vacation. So one of us is going to have to tag in with Sterling. And then Verderame and I will be back on Thursday. Follow us on Twitter. I'm at @RPatrickAllen. He's at Matt Verderame. Thank you so much for listening, for all your support. Shout out to the folks on the Twitter Spaces, to the YouTube crew, to the audio only crew. We appreciate you all. We'll see you next week. But until then, go Chiefs.